Welcome to Leading Organizations That Matter, a podcast about leadership, organizational culture, and how we find meaning and purpose in our work. I'm your host, Ray Spadoni, former healthcare CEO, current consultant, author, teacher, and speaker. Today's topic is simplification and rational living. The title for this episode comes from Eleanor Roosevelt, who once said, "A little simplification would be the first step toward rational living." Well, Mrs. Roosevelt, I tend to agree, especially since I often work closely with leaders of organizations who want or need to manage a great deal of change for their organizations. Now, sometimes this change is in response to an environmental threat, such as a new and powerful competitor entering the market, especially a non-traditional competitor that wants to come in and do a lot of what you do. Or sometimes it's self-inflicted, such as when a new and costly innovation just doesn't pan out. Or sometimes life just happens and you need to pivot or face some type of peril. Such is the fundamental task of leaders, adjusting and adapting. It's quite common in my experience that these organizations benefit from simplifying their playbooks. Not that that is easy. In fact, it's typically quite difficult because simplification can mean doing less, and doing less can mean saying farewell to strategies, action plans, and conventions, or confronting the elephants in the room, such as founders syndrome, or sacred cows, such as pet projects sponsored by powerful and persuasive colleagues. Leaders risk being accused of sweeping too much dust under the rug if they're not willing to take these challenges on head first. And we all know what happens when you sweep too much dust under the rug. I think about two examples, one that I read about and one that I lived. The one that many of us have read about or heard about is when Steve Jobs returned to Apple for the second time as CEO. He encountered a company that had become so bloated with projects and products and marketing plans that he worried that they had lost the plot, that they were spread too thin, and that their message to consumers had become muddled. So he immediately pared down, trimmed off all of the unproductive branches of their corporate tree, and focused on creating, well, more focus. As Apple simplified, they were able to regain their footing and profitability, and then eventually systematically grew their product lines out in a more careful and staged manner. Well, clearly it worked. The example that cuts closer to home for me, because I lived it, was at Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, the at one time #1 ranked health plan in the United States. Harvard Pilgrim, when I was there, had fallen on hard times. I interviewed Lisa DiTullio in episode 43 about that, and into a state-sponsored receivership. I would say it was about as close to the brink of going out of business as possible. But the new CEO, Charlie Baker, of future governor of Massachusetts and president of the NCAA fame, came in. He made a lot of changes. A major change, or actually a whole category of change, was to simplify processes and strategies and the company's expansion initiatives and product lines and so forth. He pared it down, way down, so that they could then effectively manage the significant change that was necessary. Long story short, the company retained the top spot in the country and then grew back out once they were on more stable ground. So get smaller to eventually get bigger. The implications, I think, are pretty obvious here. If you're in an organization that is struggling to succeed or having a difficult time managing a change agenda, then ask yourself if it would make some sense to pull it back, to do less, to simplify in a Steve Jobs, Charlie Baker, Eleanor Roosevelt sort of way. Again, often easier said than done. But in the case of Apple and Harvard Pilgrim, I believe that those companies would not have survived and then ultimately thrived without ever having done so. Thanks for listening. I hope that you'll consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your platform of choice. That will help others find us here. My mission is to help empower organizations that matter by supporting those who lead them. Feel free to learn more about me and my work at Red Sail Advisors.